Media Matters did a great report on cable news economic coverage during the first quarter of 2014. And not surprisingly, they found that it greatly lacks context. And that's pretty much across the board. Of course, certain channels, the usual suspects, did better than other channels, but still overall, it's not promising. So first of all, let's take a look at mentions of inequality when discussing the economy. So of the 498 total segments discussing the economy, only 146, so roughly 29% of them, mentioned economic inequality. Now, some people might try to defend that and say, well, you could talk about the economy without talking about income inequality, and maybe that would make sense if our income inequality numbers were lower or if the disparity was less, but that's not the case. In fact, there's a good argument to be made that one of the biggest problems facing the United States of America and one of the biggest issues facing the American people is income inequality, is the fact that the billionaires are controlling the political system, more people are slipping into poverty, there is this war on the middle class that is alive and well, and the trends are continuing to go in the wrong direction. So with that being the case, I mean, I don't want to go too far and say every single segment should have mentioned income inequality, but it should at least be half of them. You know, if you're really having a serious discussion about the economy, you have to bring up the fact that, what were the overwhelming statistics that we covered on the show recently? In the world, for example, you have 80 people that have more wealth than the bottom 3.5 billion. How insane is that? 80 people have more money than half of the world. And then what is it? The 400 richest Americans have more money than 50% of Americans. The Walton family alone, so 6 people, they have more money than 40% of the American people. You need to discuss these big picture things when you're talking about the economy, and only 29% of the time do they do that. Now, let's also take a look at the deficit reduction chart. This is even more interesting to me. So 63 segments mentioned deficit reduction, and of those, only 5 or 8% mentioned the deficit is, in fact, shrinking right now. So in other words, most of these segments, they're shrieking and squealing and bitching and moaning about, oh, we need to do deficit reduction. This is insane. The national debt and the deficit, it keeps adding up. We're leaving this burden for our grandchildren. Now, of course, that also fundamentally misunderstands what the national debt is and what a deficit is. In fact, all economists will tell you that when you have public deficits, that means private surpluses. So the more money the government spends, the better the private sector does. In fact, debt is the lifeblood of capitalism. You can't have capitalism without debt, and every sovereign nation on earth has a national debt. So it's very misleading the way that they cover it and the way they talk about everybody's a deficit hawk. We got to cut it, we got to cut it, we got to cut it. But even if you accept that basic premise that, oh, we should cut it, they don't even mention the fact that it is being cut. So when President Obama took office, he inherited a $1.3 trillion deficit from George Bush, and now it's been cut to $680 billion. But they don't even bring that up. Okay, but now here is the most damning chart in my opinion. Economists have been left out of discussion on the economy. So 29% of the guests are political guests, and they talk about the economy, okay? 10% are what's considered other, whatever that may be. And 58% are journalists talking about the economy. Only 2% of the people who spoke about the economy on the news are economists. So only 2% of the time we're dealing with experts here. Okay, that's totally inexcusable, man. That's totally inexcusable. And look, some people might try to turn the table around on me and say, well, you don't bring on economists to talk about things. Yeah, but I don't bring on anybody to talk about anything because I'm not CNN. I don't have a gajillion dollars at my disposal. And what I do is a political talk show. I admit to you that it's an opinion show. I admit to you it's talk radio. This isn't, I'm not doing hard news coverage, and that's it. That's what they're supposed to be doing, at least in theory, on CNN and Fox News and on MSNBC and on the rest of them. But only 2% of the time, with the amount of money that they have, these guys only brought on economists 2% of the time to talk about the economy. That's inexcusable, man. You should only have economists talking about the economy. Just like you should only have climate scientists talk about the climate. I mean, these things go without saying. So the bottom line is, and the major takeaway from this report from Media Matters is that they're not telling you the truth, man. You know, if the job of the news is supposed to be to give you the information, to give you the data, to give you the facts of reality and what's happening in the world today, and put things in context and put things in perspective. And just the fact that they'll talk about the deficit and talk about how it needs to be cut, but then they don't bring up the fact that it is being cut. You know, just the fact that they talk about the economy and don't mention income inequality hardly at all. The fact that when you talk about the economy, there's no economists. Get your shit together, man, because, you know, it's basically turning into, if you turn on CNN, if you turn on Fox News or any of the mainstream channels, it's like sports radio now. Just assholes giving their opinion nonstop, and they're acting as if it's factual when it isn't.